This is the guy who designed Islamabad, and he posits that in density, that when cities get more dense, when people are really up close and struggling as we are in Bangalore, that somehow in that density, creative energy sort of thrives. Like we're doing now, that somehow these outliers, people who are trying to do different things, that because there's no space to move anymore, you start colliding with each other, and in those collisions, great things get produced. So, I don't know, 60s, 70s, New York and Soho, all of the artists are in one place sort of creating these really, an incredible time of great production. And Bangalore seems to be in that kind of buzz right now with music. Kerala's like that, a lot of Kerala, the big cities, Kochi, Calicut, Trivandrum, I mean, there seems to be this, this something in the water that's making it. But it's really this notion that a great urban condition, great result of urban density is this idea of the seniors. And then there's deliberation, which again you guys are already familiar with this idea of being very deliberate about what you're doing, which means that there's a process by which you're really looking at things through models, through drawings, really trying to, I had the great chance to go to Zuntor's office, and Zuntor is 82, and you would imagine that Zuntor can now imagine everything and that he really doesn't need models. Like, come on. I mean, when do you stop making models, right? But his office is full of these models, all set up at his eye level. So they are set up on these poles, and they're mostly cutaway sectional models. And he's just constantly walking past them, and the moment and things click in that you're seeing it always in the way that you will experience it in reality. And so this whole process of deliberation, of this kind of slow practice, is this, are we doing it right? Are we doing what needs to be done? Is it going to feel, this idea of what is it to be in that, to have an embodied experience? And you guys are doing it already. A lot of practices, I have stopped doing this whole thing because it takes time and effort to, and of course we don't have either of those things. And the last most important thing for us, and which we very rarely, almost never reach, is this thing that Eliot used to talk about, this idea of the coming together of the precedent, of history, of the canon, if you will. And the canon is everything. Your library shows that you're seeking the canon. What is it that I'm doing? What is the history of this effort? What did other people do before me? This kind of understanding Homer, if you will, or understanding Shakespeare, or understanding, Kalidas, that in understanding the past, somehow you have that armor. But more importantly, you're also understanding the zeitgeist. What is it about today? And Eliot talks about the great traditional writer, or the creative pursuit being the coming together of these two things: an understanding of history, a real understanding of history, and a real finger on the pulse, that you were able to bring from history and deploy it to create something that is new. This is the toughest, this idea of resonance, that you go to one of these ancient buildings and they still feel completely contemporary, that it moves you in a way that you can't explain. It's like going to IIM in a way, to be absolutely predictable, that every time you go there you feel somehow that it is ancient and modern at once, and how do you make something like that? And that, I don't have any projects in here to show you how that works. So origins, also context, but origins, this is a fantastic essay. If you guys haven't read it, it's available for free online. But Heidegger talks about dwelling a lot. He's written on dwelling, a great essay. But this piece basically talks about architecture as this maker of presence. We talk about context often as response, that we've been presented with a context and we are responding to that context, whereas Heidegger says that in fact it isn't really about response, it's about bringing forth things that are hidden. So in a way, rather than being reactive, it is proactive, it is creating a way in which, and the great example for that in my mind is a lot of Korea's work. Korea's work is, whatever you may like it or not like it, but underlying a lot of his projects is this incredibly political man. He's worried about equity, he's worried about access, he's worried about why our cities are collapsing, and it preoccupies him. He's dissatisfied with all of his work. He doesn't know how to, deploy his talents to save the city. It's burning all around him and he's constantly pissed off. So how does his work show this? So all of his buildings are about access to the sky, access for people, this demolition of public institutions in a way through scale and architectural maneuvers to create spaces of incredible intimacy. So how do you bring into the practice your preoccupations that are political and so architecture is a way through its embodiment, a reflection on society. So this Heidegger of course talks about the static building giving presence to everything that is kinetic around it. My brother, and that's me, and my brother and my mom. And I was in boarding school and we used to come to Trivandrum and then I would catch a flight to go to Dubai. My parents lived there. And almost every visit to Trivandrum would mean that we would get out to Kovalam because we would then be able to go use you would pay I think 100 rupees or something and you'd be able to use the pool. And they had amazing fried fish, and so we would go there out to Kovalam, and I still remember that encounter with the building. That every time you entered, it's like a cavernous entrance. You're getting into the rock to get into this building, and it's very dark. And you get through this darkness out onto that platform where the pool is, and from that platform you can look out onto the horizon. And this incredible variation between your experience as you enter and this platform out in the thing. It's something that stays with you, and it was a great introduction to what great architecture can do, just even for someone who wasn't just about 10 years old. And then the other things about Origins is that we had, there's a magical time at BMS around maybe 10 years, sometime in the late 80s to the mid 90s, where a lot of really good practitioners actually came out of that time at BMS. And it has nothing to do with the college itself. The college was like the Wild West. We didn't have any classes and we just were left to our devices. As long as you showed up for the exams and you passed, everybody was happy. And we didn't have semesters, so it was 1 year, and so I would say that maybe 6 months of the year we didn't do anything. So we do NASA, because NASA would be sometime in December, and so that first leg of your year is spent preparing for NASA and taking NASA as an excuse to travel everywhere to find the site. Like, let's find the site, And so we would travel, and that's actually during NASA. That's Manoj, you can see sitting there. That's Guru, that's me, Sandy. With the jacket. Very chic even then. And then Nagaraj, Vastare, Vimal who passed away. So Vimal, Sandy and Manoj were our paradigm. I can't remember his name. Do you remember his name? Yeah, but that's a lot of us working at NASA, and learning everything from, for us actually Nagaraj was kind of the great guru. He introduced us to a lot of books. He asked us to travel to specific places and look for specific things. Like really a person mentoring us to just make sure that you're not going to get anything here. Leave, go to Ahmedabad, go here, go there, pick these things up. And because NASA was such a big thing, we continuously won trophies during that time. So this is our G7 group. That's Harish and Suni is in front of me. So take NASA very seriously. It's a very important part of your education. So that's our G7 trophy entry, which we won. The trophy that year was quite an amazing in Bhopal. All of them. Harish, all of them still. Only three of us are still architects. The rest have all dropped off.
Which year was this?
This is 93. 93, before any of you were born. And then Bangalore also. So because BMS was so sort of devoid of real instruction, we only had Dubey, who was God bless him, was the one sort of shining light. Dubey and Dinesh Verma, actually two great teachers we had. But then there was also the base group, which was very active at that point in Bangalore. So that's, bunch of them, Kanade brothers, Navnath, who passed away recently, and Shankar. That's Nikhil Arni, who was from SEPT, one of Doshi's very favorite students. That's Claire Arni, I don't know.
Claire Arni, the photographer.
Yeah, the photographer who was Nikhil's ex-wife. There's Edgar, you can see, second from the right there. Edgar. There's Edgar here as well, and Edgar looking very spiffy there with Nikhil. There's Dubey in the middle there. Yeah, so this was, I mean, they would have these just like today, but these would be completely random at Nikhil's house mostly or at CMT. And they would suddenly pull out slides, they would have traveled to some place and then they would start arguing in front of us and talking about architecture in this incredibly passionate way. And it showed us what it was to be really preoccupied with something. That this was their life, that architecture was life, that they spent all their living hours thinking about it, especially someone like Mohe and the Kanade brothers. They were completely steeped into it even at that point in time. Talking about dimensions and sections and the way the plinth worked. I mean, to just get into things at a really intimate level. So it was a great thing for us that they were there. Like the BMS seniors, both Suni and I went to MIT as well, and in MIT as well, we found a kind of cohort of people. We were all in one part of that large department. We had made our own space there. It was a very socialist sort of environment in those days, and so you carved out a little hovel within the studio. You created it out of plywood, etc., and you just created your little world within that large department. But it was a mix of people from all over the world, and if ever you're thinking of graduate studies, there's no better reason to do it than it forces you to confront who you are, because you're suddenly out of your comfort zone. You have to define what is important to you. And so the familiar prejudices that all of us share somehow you confront with someone else who doesn't share that prejudice or that history. And so it widens your perspective in that regard. Just as travel does if you spend time intimately with locals as you travel. So Cuba, Turkey, Taiwan, Mexico, South Africa. So it was a fantastic. We were there 4 years. Luckily I went 2 years and then Suni went 2 years. And so we got a really wonderful 4-year time, 5 years in Boston. Also, some things happen by chance and they then become your preoccupation for life. And so the first thing is that when I was in second year, Mamta, who's now the dean at BMS, asked me to do a presentation on Khan, and I'd never heard of Khan before. And so it was my first introduction to Khan, and it's been my everlasting preoccupation to try and figure out what exactly he's after, because he's such an enigmatic architect and he writes in such a sort of obtuse way that you're really wondering if you understood it, what he's trying to get at. But when you go to his building, somehow they move you in ways that not much modern architecture moves you, that there seems to be something really ancient and primordial in those spaces. Same with IIM. We chanced upon IIM, thanks again to Nagaraj. He told us about it when we were doing DY Patil, and so we went there and we were blown away by it. And I continue to keep going because it's just. I pestered the local architect there when I was a student, and then Doshi came. This is '94, so what is that? 30 years ago. And Doshi wrote this thing for me saying that if you have to do something meaningful, then you have to understand the flow. You have to be yourself. This idea of flow seems to elude me even today. What is the flow? And I remember Bob Dylan talking about it, that sometimes you are in this kind of, there's a hot streak. You can feel it, like in the morning you're in the office and suddenly everything you're doing is just like amazing, Of course, the next day you look at it and you're like, what the shit did I just do? But in that moment you feel it, like it's coming through you,
It's all figured out.
Yeah, it's all clicking, So this idea of flow, all artists are after it. There's this wonderful, presentation by an author, and she says that, she's standing in the fields and suddenly she can feel the poem coming at her. And she has to rush back because she doesn't have a pen or paper or anything, and she has to rush back home because she has to write it before it passes by, and it's gone. It's like that thing in the night just before you sleep.
Yeah.
It's completely clear, and in the morning you're like, man, what was that thing? I figured it all out. So that's the flow. And then also the other chance encounter was with Varki. I was doing my thesis and I met Varki, Professor Varki at CEPT. And he spent 2 hours with me, just some random guy showing up at his door from Bangalore. And he charted out my whole undergrad thesis in those 2 hours. Here's where you start, here's what you look for, here are the drawings you will make, this is the scale at which you will make those drawings. Everything in this little book that I still have, but talking about all of the things that you need to consider, because I had a thesis, a site for my thesis, I was going to do it in Bangalore. I got some drawings, and so he set everything up. You can see the notes kind of in the back of that sheet as well. Yeah, so that's Varki. So Khan, Varki, Doshi, nice triumvirate. And this is my undergrad thesis before computers. So I stayed in Bombay for a month or so. I had a friend helping me, Ranjit Naik, who practices here now. He came, he was in Bombay as well, and so we measured through a whole bunch of that environment. We got these maps made out. And so this is Banganga in Walkeshwar. It's a site that sits at the head of the Walkeshwar tank, or the Banganga tank. And so it's that, sort of T-shaped site where I put a building in that as a community building. So very kind of articulated plan which connects the tank to the ocean through this axis, which is like the organization of a lot of the buildings there. But just, something that we've continued to be preoccupied with in all of our work even today, this idea of a very articulated section, a participatory space section that has a lot of levels and places from which to sort of enjoy. So it's, sometimes one idea is good enough for a lifetime. You can run on it for a while. So that's the section inside. Just we were so caught up with it. And then our first project. This is 2003, 2004. We got the project in 2004. We got our first architectural project without anything before this. So it was a complete stroke of luck to have an institution to begin our practice. It was an acre site. It was a 30,000 square foot building with an orphanage at the back, some vocational training, a dispensary up front onto the street, a kind of wedding venue or mandapa there. And so the building had these kind of three components and the two courtyards that kind of give you a sense of separation between the two, a separate entrance for the orphanage and a separate entrance for the hall and a separate location for the, so kind of three buildings sitting within one. But more importantly than the organization, the plan was this chance, again, the chance of having a great contractor on this project who really instructed us on how to go about doing this building, but also in the choices one made with regards to the material. That in choosing the brick and making the walls, that somehow you would save a lot of money, and that became then the driving sort of idea behind the building. So we got a wonderful engineer from Tanjavur who helped us make these vaults. So I don't know if almost all of the roofs are made out of this brick vault. It's a great insulator. It helped us address the heat and it's predicated on this 1:2 kind of ratio for most of the vault spans, and so you get these kind of ties and walls, etc., that break the span of those vaults. It's a segmental vault, and so that the arch sort of makes the floor. It's kind of that way. That's our labor contractor and our contractor's daughter, who's now an architect. And so she, right after they removed the scaffolding, she would be running up on the roof. The contractor was so confident of his work. But yeah, this was at 500 rupees a square foot with a lot of help from him to address a very, very low. And then thanks to this project, we got a whole bunch of work with the same NGO after the tsunami hit. We did a bunch of these schools at the beginning of our career. Again, all on very, very low costs, 500, 600 bucks a square foot, community buildings, schools that became part of the village, etc. Again, schools. This is all in Taranambadi. This is Chinnapudi actually, these two pictures, and that's Taranambadi. But there are also institutions within what was all housing that was done after the tsunami by other NGOs. And so these towers and the school after school hours became community buildings. So a lot of community activities in the evenings. They were doing farming. They were having classes here, and so these big towers were basically to show the building as a beacon within these communities. That's Manimaran, who's no more. He was really the guy who really told us how to go about getting this cost down and really helping us organize one of the most organized sites. And that person in grey shirt is engineer Rajendran, who in sweltering heat, we were doing just 4 feet, and he just helped us make that vault. and then it was like magic, It's so quick and it's such an effective thing to do. We've never done it since, but yeah. And that's Thomas and his wife Liz. Right after the tsunami, they were living in Trichy. They worked for the NGO. These guys, right after the tsunami, the night after, they were in Taranambadi with relief work, nowhere to stay. 2 little kids, not even in school then, and they still live there. They've been there the whole life. Just leaving everything to serve the community. Quite amazing. Beginnings, first things. Meaning is, I've already described it, but these are great paintings by Magritte. This is not a pipe, he says, so neither is the image a pipe, nor is that a pipe. A pipe is the pipe, right? You have to hold it and you have to smoke it. And so this idea that with our phones and with our computers that we are getting sidelined or we're getting fooled to imagine that that's architecture, that somehow if I took good pictures of my buildings, that would be enough, but actually embodied experience requires us, and that's why it's called treachery of images, that we are living in that age actually. This is, I think, 19th century, Magritte saw it coming. And then key of dreams is that meaning comes from each of us, so nobody has to have the pressure that somehow I have to find someone else's meaning, or that there's one meaning to things. So someone's looking at that clock and he's not thinking of the clock, but he may be thinking of something else. Like I look at the horse and I think of my dad because we used to go to the horse park or have ice cream on Sundays. That each of us bring to the project our own prejudice, our own background, our own memories. That meaning is not about one meaning, but it's about us finding ourselves through the work, as Wittgenstein says. Meaning is also these 2 paintings. So one of the things, this is the Irani Cafe with the Irani Cafe owner just after the emergency. And it could be a COVID painting as well. So the Irani Cafe owner has become like his marble top. It's hewn out of the same stone. But wistfully he is imagining the days when there were people in his cafe. Bustling crowds in his cafe, in the mirrors, And today there's nobody. And so wistfully waiting. And so this idea of embedded, this Irani Cafe owner and the table made out of that same material, always in that same context. That some of our buildings are that they are about just background and about just being, an extension of what exists. But there's another way of thinking of meaning as well, or about context, that it's each of us, just like Magritte's painting, Patwardhan has his own version of Magritte's painting, The Key of Dreams. And here, the city is made out of all of these different vantages, that there's a person lost in his thoughts, there's some white shirt guy looking somewhere else, the guy in the bus is looking straight at us, the people on the mezzanine. So the city is made out of all of these different trajectories, and all of us, our clients, our consultants, our people in the office, we are all looking at the project differently. And really the job of the architect is this assimilation of what is of meaning from these different points of view. This is a great drawing. I'm sorry for the very poor resolution, but this is Leplastrier on that amazing trip he made when he was in his 20s across India on a motorcycle on a Honda. The Honda lands in Bombay. He assembles he had these extension gas tanks on it, and he rides across the country, and he stops at Ellora and various other places. But he makes this amazing drawing of Ellora, and he says in making the plan and section of that building, he was able to come to what the metaphor is. What does this building mean? And he says, as a young initiate in the order, you come at the bottom of this section, you come through those gates into this building. The Buddha is deep set at the end of this cave. You can barely see him. You have no perspective because the gates are blocking your view, and you have no sense of the light. The truth is obscured. And as you get senior, you get up to the top of the cave. Now there's light on the Buddha, and now you're above the gate and you have perspective. That just like in La Tourette, the poor young initiates live in the rooms which have no vantage, and the older gurus are in the place where you see the horizon. So now you've sort of evolved and copied it from Ellora. And the same thing, meaning is also, completely architectural, that you can deploy meaning through architectural means. And this is Sikandra, the great tomb of Akbar's tomb in Sikandra, this most amazing building, beautiful pavilion with all the breezes flowing through it. Akbar waiting there for eternity, for Gabriel to come. But when you go there, you see that it's an amazing gateway with the first time that minarets are up on a mausoleum. You go through this wonderful garden. There are impalas running around in the garden even today. And this beautiful building, most elegant building. You come through that gatehouse into this beautiful room with turquoise and gold foil and all of the riches. Truly the gateway, gateway to heaven in a way. But the moment you step through those doors, you're in any sensory stimuli. And in fact, if those lights were switched off and there's just that one candelabra at the back, you can imagine that there's almost no sight. You can't see anything. And in that moment of partial blindness, darkness, complete darkness, all of your other senses are heightened. And that in that passage, somehow you're making a transition from what is the real, tangible world to a place of transition, to a place of incredible power. And everybody feels it. They're all frolicking in the gardens with their lovers, whatever, with their kids. But the moment they come through here, you can see suddenly that it's all, you stop, you pause, and it changes. You feel this in Srirangam, right? You go through all of those gates, and at the end, when you're in that room alone, at the scale of an individual, that suddenly you feel the power of this kind of really incredible architectural maneuver. Of course, it helps that the client has come to this architect and said, build me a time station, a kind of, a time machine that I can wait for time immemorial, for the angels to come. I wonder which client's going to give us a project like that. But it is the most incredible room, just to be in. And when I went there, I took the kids and went. The summer after I went there for the first time, I said, we have to go to Sikandra with the kids. But when I went there, there was nothing, there was nobody there, empty. And in this room, in the corner, in the darkness, there was this old man sitting and reciting from the Quran. You just get goosebumps, This room is reverberating with his sound. And there's nothing else, like you can barely see anything in there. It's just unbelievable. So yeah, and it's all architectural, it's all about scale, it's all modulated by arithmetic, and it's all deployed through so keep that in mind when you think of architecture today, right? When are we going to, so when anybody visits here, we either take them to IM or we're going to Melkote or we're going to Nandi Hills, but we have very little to show that will really move someone that, my God, this is something that's really important, so why have we lost the plot, what is it that we are trying to go for? This has got all of the accreditations, right? It's a great building in terms of its performance. Why doesn't it move you? Like, I don't want to take anyone to see it, it doesn't mean anything to me. And so it's an important question to ask, this idea of meaning. And so a bunch of projects just to talk about meaning, and they're all institutional, they're all schools. And for me, the schools are all about, so when we get a program like this, and I'm sure you guys must be from Manipal, you must have got, so many studios, so many this, that. And then someone in the office would have said, okay, just do 20%, and then circulation, right? Of course. And then we are at 30, and then they're negotiating, how come you're doing 30, how can you pay for it, etc. But everything about institutions is in that yellow. That 4920 is the institutional character of that building. Everything else means nothing, it's just accommodation. And so just like these great calligraphers, the Japanese calligrapher is painting these black on the white canvas, and they ask him, what are you doing? And he said, I'm trying to find the white space. I'm trying to carve out and create, and that 4920 is that stuff in between. And so really that becomes the figure, the stuff that's in between things. And that stuff in between is this wonderful environment that you want to give, where by chance Akbar joins Tansen to meet Haridas, and as Haridas sings, Akbar faints, collapses. Akbar is without his shoes, so he's come like a common man. Haridas doesn't know he's Akbar, and he starts singing, and in that beautiful verdant environment, covered in shade with peacocks, it's the most amazing place for these learned men to exchange their realizations. And so we have to create a place like that when we do a school, a place of incredible comfort and of various scales, so that different kinds of people, different kids can find different places to occupy. So this is a school that we did just off Nice Road. This is called IRA. And we were really keen on that shaded stuff, right? The stuff that's between things. And what's the nature of that? Are there places to congregate, places to pause, places to run through, etc.? What is that quality of that in between? And so the plan is incredibly organized on that. It's an 8-meter grid, organized, all and just moving things around is a very, very sort of standard operation. A lot of Korea's buildings are organized in that way, that you just have a mat, and on the mat then you're organizing program. But really the articulated space in between is what is of interest to us. That space in between is really the heart of the project. And so a bunch of that. So you get all of the program, but then you start breaking up that program to create all kinds of terraces and volumes within. So that's the building. We have actually added more to it now. So there's an extension to the right. But the outside of it is fairly nondescript. It's basically all of the program that is just manifesting itself in that kind of simple rhythm. And then as you enter, you start encountering the qualities of the inside volume, which is really the point of the project. So these are just some photographs. It's kind of, I think, now reached its memory limit. So there's the classrooms. I'm just going to run through all that. But this is, we had this wonderful girl in the office, Surubi, who now is a full-time illustrator. And she made this amazing drawing which tells me, which told us about what it was that project is about. Not really about the program, but about the quality of that in-between space with different scales of places, bigger spaces, smaller spaces for the shy ones, for the gregarious ones. That there were all kinds of venues for people to occupy. And of course, when you overlook, you feel like you're part of, so, when you go there, when it's break time or when the school is letting out, it's just the best time to go, because all of these places are then filled up with kids and activity. So there's some pictures of it with that kind of north, the light on top sort of filtering through. It's also open on the top, so there's this kind of natural draft of air that brings comfort within the building. And this idea that you can see right across sections to access and enjoy. Yeah. It's worth, we like it a lot. It's really crudely built. It was a local contractor, but it's a nice, the kids really love it, and it's a nice environment. We did another school, again predicated on the maps, just like Korea's buildings. This is for Neve, and we were really thinking about the Swiss Pavilion, Cobb's beautiful building, which has all of this kind of articulated plan, again predicated on a mat, on a grid, and then on top of which hovers this parasol, which gives you a great terrace to use. And we were really thinking about that parasol and this very articulated section, like that diagram below, that has all of the places under that shade roof. That in Bangalore we're very lucky. If you provide shade, then it becomes incredibly comfortable through the year. So these sections that give you. We had a wonderful boy on this, boy called Shashi, Shrikant Shashi, who now was with Rahul till very recently. But he ran the project from start to finish, and he just joined the office. Just a wonderful guy. Groups of threes, these classrooms, two of them on the lower floor and then another 3 on the upper floor, and they share these sort of communal spaces, spill outs that are much more, so different scales of how you want to occupy. And 50% of this building is all in between classrooms and admin and all of that. So it's also a very, very sophisticated client, someone who came back from Singapore and found that none of the schools were up to the mark, and so just started her own school. She's also very wealthy, so she just started Eve in a bungalow in Whitefield, and then this was the first building that they built for themselves. So these are my brother's photographs of Eve with this parasol, this aluminum expanded metal mesh roof. When we took the pictures, they put that German tent there, but that's actually a terrace up on top there where they could have their meals. So there you can see it now. So it's got all of this. It's like a little village of buildings under a kind of regulating roof. And then there's this threshold that you cross. So in a way, even in IRA, you do that. You make a notional crossing from the profane world into what is the children's world, the beautiful articulated space within, that you make this kind of crossing across landscape. And inside is this variegated section and quality of diffuse light and shade. And a completely flexible space which is protected from the rain, and they can use it for all kinds of things. And Neve has been incredibly creative in the way that they've organized programs and events across in this space. We found that in most projects, that if you create things that they never asked for, in fact they enjoy those things more than the things that were in their program. Top Me is like that. That in between space is incredible. You can imagine that they'll enjoy it forever. More than the classrooms. So that's just pictures of that kind of. And then articulating all of this, we're really keen on the flooring as well in most of the projects, that we try to figure out ways to catch the structure, to orient the program, to make that manifest, and so you're always sort of registering the way the building is organized through the flooring and the articulation of the flooring. This is another project for that IRA client. This is in Jayanagar, in JP Nagar actually, and this is a small urban building. It's on a long lease. They don't own the building, our client, and so it's a building that was going to turn into a commercial building after 20 years or something like that. So it's basically just the regulations extruded out. But what we did inside is we created all kinds of variations inside, which you could cover up eventually to create, full floors of real estate. But for now, outside is the shell, which is very, very regular, and inside is this kind of really articulated environment with brick and quota and double height volumes and stuff like that. So this is, and then because we've recessed the rooms by that 3 feet, dimension, you feel on all floors that you're completely surrounded. Of course, great rain trees all around the site as well in that corner, but they're all completely nestled in this kind of world of landscapes. It's very, very lush. So this notion of circulation, that the circulation is of course their thresholds, they're in between program, they create this kind of idea of a threshold. But more importantly, they're what Khan talked about in terms of a society of rooms, that if you had the program and you organized it and they made what he calls a society, that they engendered communal activity, coming together of people, that's really what you're after in a plan. And sometimes in rare cases, this circulation can lift you in a way that IIM does or Sikandra does, that it sort of gives you this kind of heightened, but they're portals. So circulation is all of those things, right? It's thresholds or places to meet friends or have chance encounters or contemplate, and sometimes portals as well. Third one is tectonics. This is, you guys are familiar with this, but these are buildings where we're really preoccupied with the detail. This is a stone screen in a stone factory. It's hung on a very delicate metal frame. It shields the southern face of that building from the elements, and so it creates a kind of very simple protection strategy, but using something that's really unusual to make that screen. So it's these slivers of stone of viscon white granite. It's around 50 mil at the back, around 12 mm at the front. They're little aerofoils. They're in 3 sections, and there are these bands of metal that clamp the stone from behind. They're almost imperceptible from a distance. As you get close, you can see them, but the stone is just magic. You don't anticipate it. You get close to it and you say, "Oh my God, it's stone," and it kind of throws you for a bit. And the inside and you can see now the sort of bands that catch the stone and trap them, and then that sort of side, it kind of varies as you move around it, becoming transparent and opaque depending on the angle of view. It's also a beautiful stone, so it just sort of a lot of movement. And then this is Go Native, which is in Whitefield. This is located in a place with a lot of these industrial sites. So we were really keen. It's a leased property again, so they wanted to make something in metal so that they could take it and put it somewhere else later. And so a lot of the building is made out of metal, and it's organized like one of those old hoodie factories. And so there's this notion that there are the brick elements, there's the old factory wall which still exists. There are some new brick elements which we added, and this grid of structure, which is in a way relentless, but making space for the brick objects and for the trees. That they're just sort of organized around those constraints. And that this though the building is very, very sort of industrial in a way, that it is occupied in a way that is very home-like, that has this kind of softness to it. We struggled a lot with the facade because originally we were going to demolish all of the old bits, and then one day we had a great brainwave when we were at the site, and then we convinced the client to keep the old gable end wall. And so that conversation between what existed before and the new, which is completely different in language and tenor, that it sort of makes for a very nice composition. It's a very obvious thing. A lot of people have done this notion of coming together with. It's the thing that Zumthor didn't want to do at Columba. He talks about it in that talk, that the obvious thing is to do a metal thing up against this brick, and I didn't want to do that. And I was going to show him Go Native, and I said that we'll cancel that. We'll cancel that project. He'd say, how boring. So this is pretty standard. There's the old wall, which is a robust brick wall with a stone base. In fact, the first idea to keep it came from Soumitra, because he visited the site with his office, and he said, why don't you're demolishing it anyway, why don't you keep the bricks and use the bricks, And then I said, but why don't we keep the wall, And we kept the wall. There's some memory of the old building in the new, and this is a much more literal way. The interiors were done by another person, by another practice. We didn't do it, and it's mostly just objects in that environment. She did a beautiful ikat, jute thing on the ceiling. I can't remember her name. A young girl who went to Harvard after this, and she was already so brilliant. And then she was just about to get a degree. So then, as you come in, Manju did this structure for this, and it's a masterwork. I mean, Manju understands immediately. I mean, I don't know if you guys have worked with him at all, but if you go to him and you have an idea, he's really painful to work with because you don't get any drawings and all of that. But he understands what it is that you're after. He kind of gets. You've never worked with him.
No, we've seen so many warnings.
Yeah, he's unreliable and all of that, but he gets what you're trying to do, and oftentimes he furthers what you're trying to do to the next sort of level. So here, everything about this idea that you would do lightness and heaviness, transparency and opacity, that this is the game here. That you offset all of these things, smooth things with rough things, no windows and all windows, stuff like that. I mean, just let's play with that. And so the steel structure is absolutely, almost nothing. Those columns are, 100 mmCs, it's still standing. It's a very, very light, and also this idea, when Khushru came from Pune to Bangalore, he said, really this project is also about tolerances, like how close can you get till it breaks, till it destroys, and so that's the real compositional, you're preoccupied with how close that column has to be to that wall, so that it's just enough and not too much, and it just gives you, and it's never right? You're always looking at it, shit, it should have been maybe 100 mm closer, But that's the game, that if you're going to put these things up together, then how are they going to come? And Scarpa does that magically in so many buildings. And so it's just a very nice environment with this kind of conversation between things. And then the wrapping of brick and the way that steel sort of comes up for this stair tower, again done by Surabhi. This was done by Divyang and Anna at the office. So it's a bunch of very, very talented folks who sort of worked on this with us. So this is the kitchen block with the utilities and things, and the kitchen stair tower that then supplies. Senius is, so we finished kind of the chunk of the architectural thing. Senius is, as he says, as Chipperfield says, that good architecture doesn't happen naturally. It requires the conspiracy of circumstances and participants. That many things have to happen, stars have to align, and so if things don't work out, you can blame everything else, right? You can blame that the client screwed it up, the contractor didn't show up, there was no money for this, the people in the office suck, whatever. You can use anything, right? But when that happens, when there is a coming together of those things, it's magic. That you suddenly feel charged by this engagement with a client. And so really the architect is like Kabiru, he or she is wearing these glasses and he's figuring out how to see the world through these other lenses. What is my client looking at? Is he asking for the donkey? Is he asking only for the tail? Is he asking for a monkey? I don't know. I mean, what is he asking for? To understand that very early on in the project is most essential. And so that's Kabiru. And Khan, the great legend, has also had, he's working on this mother house over 2 years. He starts with that plan for the first meeting. He goes and meets the sisters and the sisters say, that's a beautiful project, but it's 5 times over budget. And Khan comes back and he doesn't know where to go with that plan, right? It's completely lost, like, what do I do now? And so the central premise in that, which is that there's a separation between what is the spiritual life, where they stay, and where they engage with the public. That there's this separation, like all monasteries, that the church and where the sisters stay are separate. As Khan starts squeezing the plan down, reducing the footprint of the building, changing it so that he can come down to that $1 million budget, he comes to a plan which encapsulates what the motherhood is about. The mothers themselves didn't see a difference between their spiritual life and their public engagement. That plan as a party collapses the two things into one gesture. Of course, they ditched the project after that and said that even a building is the wrong way to go. And that we have to go out into community and serve the community in the community. So they ditched the whole thing, and Khan showed them the way. Only 2 years. But that's, so the programs, you can see that the components are the same, they just down Xeroxed a bit and reorganized, but it's a great plan, one of the great plans. The Dominican Mother House. And the courtyard becomes, very, very fragmented version of what it was in that first scheme. It's incredible. Khan made one model for this project. That's not Khan's model. It was a model for one of the schemes that he trashed. So Khan never even got into sort of, making all of the exercises. Yeah, anyway. So this idea of collaboration is something that, we are really pursuing often. We are seeking that. And so when we got a project here in Bangalore, we reached out to Allies and Morrison, Graham Morrison and Bob Allies, who run an amazing practice in London, and so we collaborated with them on 2 projects. I'll show you. This is Alila in Whitefield. It's around 90 meters. It's a 2-acre site. It's a 90-meter long building. But what's amazing about this is, and the east side is completely open to the landscape. The west side is all sort of sequestered, protected. So it's a very, very simply organized plan, predicated on a 4-meter grid with circulation breaking the building into 3 equal bays, 7 bays in each building. So circulation organized as per the fire, structure organizing program, and orientation organizing what is open and what is closed. But this, Allies and Morrison came with this model 4 weeks into this project, which is it just blows my mind, that they were able to crystallize what is a very complex building in terms of services, a hotel, an apartment, fire, all of the things that you struggle with a large building like that, and to bring it into this party which is so simple and clear in terms of organization. 3 bays, circulation, hotel at the bottom, apartments on the top, transfer floor in the middle. It's just like a formula, that they just cracked it, and it was incredible. And so the building, of course, now it's surrounded by other buildings. We did all of the interiors ourselves. Suni did all of the sourcing. It was the first time that we got this kind of incredible mandate from Gautam, our client, that we mocked everything, we got everything custom. It was just the most amazing commission. And we got to do everything that, we were hoping to try, and we had not built an orphanage, till then. To get this after that was quite something. This is 2010, I think, 2008. 7, yeah. So there's Suni. Where is the light fixture you were supposed to send me? Where's the furniture? But everything here is custom. Like all the chairs, the art, that's my brother's art on the walls. Everything, the fans were made specially, in Banaras by this guy who now sells them as part of his catalog. So it's all a great opportunity to do. And there was this wonderful water body that split the outdoors from the inside, a wonderfully articulated flow pattern which marks the gradation out to the outside. So the hotel rooms all had these balconies which were eccentric, sort of looking back out to the lake on the left. And then on the 5th floor was this pool which was flushed out with the deck, and then all the hotel interiors. And then we did a beautiful house for Gautam and Vinuta up on the roof, which was a kind of house for 1001 nights, a house of parties, wonderful places to congregate up on top with great art and furniture and all that. And then lovely terraces, etc. So you're in this house up on top, but having access to wonderful mature trees and landscape. And then a lovely pool up on the top, where when you're in the pool, the Vartu water and this water are merged. It's like an amazing trick. It was a great project. And we worked with Krishna Hegde on this, which was again, Krishna Hegde is the one who handled IIM Bangalore for Durshi, for Mahindaraj when he was working on that. We worked with Nagbhushan, who was the plumbing consultant at IIM Bangalore. We worked with Radha Krishna, who was the site engineer at IIM Bangalore. What could go wrong, right? Plumbing.
Oh God.
And then this is Nalanda. Nalanda also we did with Allies and Morrison. So we did this amazing trek across India with Graham and I. He landed in Bombay, did 361, 361. And then we went to Baroda, we went to Nashik, I think. We did a bunch of lectures, and that was the excuse for him to make his way out to Nalanda with me on trains, buses, and aeroplanes or automobiles. So it's the great John Candy film. And then we land in Nalanda, and then we see the Nalanda ruins. We come to the site. We spend like 3 days there. He comes back to the office. We're in Bangalore. He comes to the office bright and early. He's put a sheet in front of him, and he makes 4 of these diagrams on that first day. So the first is that I've got an idea for what the organizing principle of this plan is. Very simple. It's got a grid of streets. The center is all pedestrian, and it connects at 2 points to the outer periphery of my campus. It also makes notional connections to the south where the railway track is. That's my diagram. Now that diagram will get mutilated because the land has contours, there are water systems on that land, and so there's this kind of navigation across the landscape. From that comes the block diagram so that I get the grid, and in that block diagram this and that give you a sense that there is a notion of what is monumental, the big department buildings, and what is everyday, the housing, the smaller buildings that feed these bigger buildings. And so this notion of a pattern that is immediately distinguishable as a diagram on that landscape, that there is this kind of central spine, it's pedestrian, it's got big monumental buildings on it, and it's served by all of this fabric on the peripheries. These two were made after the fact, so that's actually the plan of the campus once we were done with it. And you can see the kind of relative similarity to where we landed to where Graham had this kind of idea very early on in the process. And these are a set of diagrams that Alfredo, the Venezuelan architect who was the job architect with us on this made. So the first is this notion of connections, like in Graham's first sketch, that there are villages across this campus that we would like to connect through passages through our campus. This was not to be, because the moment we left the site, I think a week or two after the project was announced, they raised a 15-meter tall barbed wire with cutting off all of the neighborhoods from the campus. So this would never have worked. But the notion was that there would be these connections from the railway station out to the highway and across from the villages through our campus, and the campus becomes part of city grain. The second one is the asymmetry of the place, that on one side you get the Rajgir Hills, which is all sacred geography. It's got all of these caves and ruins. And that on one side you have prospect out onto those hills, and on the other side you've got the highway, and you've got this much more sequestered housing or development. That's the most important set of drawings for Nalanda, because there were 7 different departments in Nalanda. The program was incredibly elaborate, 500,000, it was around 500 acres, and there was around, I want to say around 1 lakh square feet or more maybe, I don't remember now. But there was so much program that it was just difficult to go through that program statement. And what Alfredo did, which was genius, is that he took one of those big blocks, let's say one department, there are 7 departments, I'll take one department, and I'll divide the rest of the program by 7. And I'll make a module of that one thing. One department, all of the housing that feeds that, 1/7 of it, and that becomes my block. So what it does is, one, it gets us a very simple module with which to lay out the program, but more importantly, it tells us that the campus is a mixed-use campus. It isn't all of the academic buildings in one end, all of the housing somewhere else, all of the playfield somewhere else. No. The housing and the departments are enmeshed together, so it becomes mixed-use and it's alive all the time. And so that was a big point of the thing, and the idea that it would be a dense environment, like in most hot and dry conditions, that there would be this real density that would give me shade and comfort to use the campus through the year. And lastly, this idea of simple buildings and complex open spaces, that you would make the buildings really simple in the sense that they were orthogonal and they weren't doing all kinds of tricks, but in the way that they negotiated geography or the land, or the topography, and the way that they came together, that they were basically interested in, our interest was in what was in between. Just like the calligrapher, we are trying to find that in-between space that then has variation in scale and creates a sense of what is center, what is periphery, what is intimate and what is public. And this, when you go to Nalanda, all of these interstitial spaces actually are really profound because of the scale of these, these archetypal forms, that somehow that's what really captivates you, the space that's in between things. And so that was the campus plan with all of these buildings, and that campus looking back towards the Rajgir Hills and that landscape, and these wonderful big, all made out of brick, out of that local. We designed the big vaulted dining block, and then Alfredo did everything else, including that beautiful library. A&M did everything else. But that's like a heroic vaulted building, 3-stories tall, like the Moneo, the Moneo building with the Roman ruins, like that. We were totally deflated after losing this project. But it was something that we were very excited about. And then the other project, which is all about people coming together, is the Bangalore International Center, which was a real pain for 7 years. Sunitha and I were going to quit we had so many discussions. We should quit now, and then another 2 weeks later, now we can leave now. And it's 7 years for like 45,000 square feet. I mean, come on. What sense does it make? 18 iterations, 27 architects, 11 consultants. And zero fee. I should have that. No, grand total of around 20 lakhs is what we got for that. Yeah.
Over 7 years.
So do the math.
Basically, we paid for it.
It's our offering to the city.
Yeah.
This is the competition scheme. Moe was on the competition jury, and there were going to be 2 rounds in the competition. I submitted this just before going for the market masterclass. As I was going out, traveling to Sydney, they submitted it online, and Moe and Aparna Narasimhan and Jayasim were on the jury, and they scrapped the second phase of the competition. Said no, it's fine. This is only we will give this only the, and everybody was pissed. Like Gerard Decuna, I mean not Gerard Decuna, Dilip Decuna wrote a very tough letter to BIC saying that we'd sent only sketchy concept ideas, There was a second phase, what happened? And they said, no, we have to send it. We have to rush, we are in a hurry. And 7 years later. So that was the competition scheme, a heroic scheme, a scheme for the ages. I got emails from all over the country saying, oh my God, that's an amazing project, etc., etc. And then soon enough, they put gun on it, and it collapsed. So sometime after being awarded the project, after a couple of years, we were kind of a year and a half into the project. We were going to submit for sanctions. Everything was sorted out. We worked everything out. Everybody was happy. And when we went for sanctions, we asked the client to submit, and then the sanctioning authority, the guy who was liaising, he said, but there's this discrepancy in the site. Like your katas shows a certain size site and your project has a different size. And then we had this meeting in the office and I said, there's this big problem. So what do you want us to do? And Ravi said, Ravi Chandra was the head of the building committee, and he said, we'll have to think about it. And he later told me that they thought they would kick me out and that they would just get another architect to do the new building. Because they thought it was irresponsible that I didn't check these things. And I said, you gave me the survey. Like you fed me the site, details, and I used that. Anyway, so next we have to check the Kata documents. That's the moral of the story. And so the moment the site dimensions changed, we lost a floor in that to get all of the program and to get the widths for the big auditorium, etc. And in losing that floor, guess what we lost? Of course, we lost that floor which has no program, right? Yeah. So Jason or someone said in the meeting, oh, but it's easy, you just bring it down one level. And that's the whole project. Like there's nothing other than that in that project. So he said, come on, Jason, you can't do that. There's nothing in it. And so we struggled for a long time with no idea. So sometime, again, lucky to have some people in the office. There's this girl called Nia Kulil in the office, and Rajendra Hegde, who now has his own practice. And so we were struggling with this notion of having a kind of a box, that now we're stuck with this thing. We've got only 3 floors. What if we took that idea of a public space and put it into this 3-floor box, and then I get some kind of staircase inside, a kind of set of terraces. And so really this is the start of where we landed eventually, that drawing with this articulated inside within an envelope. And also this was how we were organizing it for a very long time, that you entered in the middle of the project and worked your way through vertical circulation in the middle, where Nia said, what if we were to take the idea of the architectural promenade, Cobb's great idea, and we put the entry at the end of the plan that forces everybody to make that passage through the plan, and that extends public space. It gives you a sense of this kind of elongated sense of what is public. And so that, I think, was a very key moment. And so from where we are entering in the middle everywhere, that suddenly then you enter at the end and you get this very long plan. And then we moved the cafe down to the ground floor, so now the ground floor feels almost all public, that there is you don't encounter a door till very late in the plan, that you get to the auditorium only right at the end of that sequence. And then you connect back out onto the landscape, and Varna's great landscape for that side. Of course, all of my very good friends, they always make it a point to tell me, oh, but if only you had built the competition scheme, what have you done, like what is this building, But yeah, I think it's better for what, so my argument to them is that in the competition scheme, this is Neil McLaughlin's argument, so after he saw the plans, he said, but in the competition scheme, the idea of public space is rhetorical. What that means is there's no program fronting onto that public space. One has to make the effort to get up and then become public. Whereas in your building now, everybody is public, because everybody who encounters the building engages with public space. Tell your friends that. So that public space has now been used by DIC for all kinds of public events, of course exhibitions, all of that. We've had 4 Nobel laureates speak in that small auditorium that we designed. And this is the true testament for an architect, that at the end of it, the life of the building happens after you've handed it over to the client. And in fact, none of it matters. What you've done before matters, but it's inconsequential. That its life and its meaning then accrues over time, and you have to have that partnership with someone, or someone has to take that building on and make something of it, and that is out of your control. And so, the great war museum that Sunitha designed unfortunately languishes because nobody has the imagination to make something of it, and it's one of the most profound spaces in the city, and unfortunately there's no one to claim it. So there, from a very heroic competition to the more simple but pragmatic BIC. So some pictures. This I'm going to go through very fast. You guys will visit. Surabhi again. You should check her out. Surabhi B6. What is her Instagram? She's amazing. Yeah, she's fantastic. But you can search for her. She does incredible illustrations now and doing really well. She was going to go for her masters, and then I said no, but architecture is not really for you. And luckily COVID hit, and she squashed her plans, and she quit architecture. So yeah, some sketches of that building when we were working on it. And this notion of a very grand portal, very sort of formal, you come in and then there is the breaking of that scale through material and through quality of light, etc., that you get a sense of a much softer, warmer inner environment that makes you suddenly pause, and it works, I think, quite well that way. We were almost not going to have that brick as well, thanks to Jason. He convinced the board to do brick. That's Raghu. This is with Didier. Didier Weiss is from Auroville. He created this wonderful, of course we had a conceptual idea for it, this kind of a womb-like interior for the auditorium. And then Didier fashioned that womb to create these panels of reflection and absorption. It is a bit of a dampened auditorium because it has to do many things, and so it isn't as resonant as you would want it for live sound. But it creates a space that then works for multiple things and is widely used and much loved sort of auditorium in the city. And then many places up in that building which again the flooring, arcing, structure, etc., the same games almost all the time. And then the terrace above and that's Harshit. Harshit now runs a threshold with Avinash, wonderful architect. I mean, just was there at the right time with us to do this. 4 years of his career here on this building. Wonderful time. This is Divyang again making these drawings during COVID, when we were thinking that never again will anybody be in this building that we made. And he said, no, there will be people, and he drew these drawings, with all of the people and, discussing, and events in the auditorium and the cafe full of people. Of course, it's back to being that, but yeah, it was, and for a brief moment in time, it felt that because that was the end. Deliberation. Oh, so final. We're kind of getting there almost. Yeah. Actually, there should be 5. There's one more after this. Wrong numbering. So deliberation is drawing, modeling, making models, etc. to see. And so I just put in this project in here. This is the Mercat Masterclass work, and this idea of being deliberate, being conscious, being involved. So that's Peter Stutchbury, Richard LaPlastic, Glenn, Britt Anderson, and Lindsay Johnston. The 4 of them run the masterclass. Lindsay is the convener, and it's at the Boyd Center, which is the most amazing. I don't know if you guys know the Boyd Center, but that's the Boyd Center. It sits facing east. That's the Shoalhaven River, and so it has perpendicular view out to the rising sun and the river. And it's at the threshold where the native landscape comes and meets the cultivated landscape. It's kind of the bridge, the threshold, if you will. And there are 2 parts to the building. There's a big hall, which is the big roof, and then there's the accommodation, which is in the narrow part of the building. But just the most amazing thing. And one of the grand rooms of the world, that beautiful room, profusely lit up in the morning. The most incredible place to sit, to work. And that you can see the transition of that landscape, it's catching that one place from which then to have prospect. And then the rooms themselves also with all of those east-facing windows with a corridor on the other side towards the forest. And with these breaks, you can see these breaks. I remember Arundhati Nag, when she came to IM, she said, building should, when you get to a public building, it should feel like there are places to suddenly just perform. And these are those terraces that suddenly the plan breaks and there's a place that suddenly you can see the ocean, I mean the river, and you feel that it's a place suddenly for performance, that you're public, you're doing a, look at that. This is my photo with a phone, it's just, you can't go wrong, it's just unbelievable in the morning. Most amazing. And so the first week at the masterclass, Richard and Glenn, they just say, just go out there and draw. And initially you don't know what to do, right? I've paid $6,000 or something and this is what we're going to do. Like, I could have done this back home. And so you're out there just drawing, and then you don't know what you're doing. You're making realistic drawings, so you're catching all the detail. And then Richard came and he said, "Oh, what are you drawing? Like, what are you trying to capture?" And then he started describing, that over the millennia, this landscape has been formed by the winds. Do you see it? And then I started making these drawings which were about the landform. How is the land falling? What is the nature of that terrain? How do I catch that? What are the shadows like? What does it feel like to be nestled under those trees? So drawing as a way to illustrate experience or to capture experience, not to document, to get a sense of being in that land. And so once you start understanding the terrain, then there's a notion of where do I put this building. You have to build for the workshop. We have to put a small 6,000 square foot building in that terrain somewhere. And so do I put the building in a way that it's in opposition to that terrain, sort of like a prow coming out? Do I straddle the terrain so that the terrain then flows and this is like a bridge across the terrain? Or do I catch the way the terrain falls and just register the way the land is articulated, that it sort of creates a way to understand what is happening in that. And so when we were there, we started, of course, in the first week, and then this notion of being engaged and drawing again and again, it comes to you, Suddenly you realize, that's what Peter is saying, or that's what Richard meant. And so we started immediately, everything is available, Richard knows, so you want a contour map now, no? And I said, yeah, we want a contour map. And then the contour maps come. And then we start registering that there are the Boyd's, his house, his studio, and that there are these two contours or these levels in that landscape which are tied back to those two. So we started catching that and making drawings of what those two general contours are like. We started using that to guide us in terms of passage, and then articulating those in terms of enclosure, so retaining walls, etc., creating those enclosures, putting roofs up against those retaining walls, so now that you get these rooms with the retaining walls catching the landscape, and then making a beautiful ramp at the end so that you would come down, you enter at a higher level, make your way down a ramp, and then come down at a lower level and end at the house. It was most magical. And coming through this kind of gentle nudging, like, did you see that? Did you go here? Did you go stand in that? Sandy was here in this with me. Sandy came for the masterclass the same year that I went. And it was incredible. And then we love this diagram, that's Murcutt's building. And there's that beautiful, now complete as a diagram, the two things sitting in that landscape, making one marking a threshold and the other marking the terrain. Resonance. So historical sense, like I was saying earlier, this idea of the zeitgeist and precedent. So what is the zeitgeist and precedent? So the precedent is the one above. So in the past, where was man situated in art? The artist predicated the notion of vista, man at the center of the universe. This is a Renaissance painting. This is Francesca, Ideal City. And this is Mulholland Drive, a much more contemporary painting. You decide where the vantage is. And as a viewer, I get the choice to put what I want on my Insta handle. Like, nobody tells me what to publish, no one tells me what to put out. Everything's up to me, and that the painting captures that in a way that we saw this in LA, right? And it's this amazing piece, right? So there are maybe 5-6 sets of people picking their vantage, like they're looking at their part of the painting, It's just amazing. It's a huge painting, Mulholland Drive. And this idea of resonance isn't new, right? So there's Cobb and there's Palladio. Cobb's Villa Stein and Palladio's Malcontenta are exactly the same in size. So Cobb is taking Palladio, he's putting his tracing on top of it, and he's made a plan. But what's amazing about, so he starts with history. 5:8 proportion of the building, and it's organized almost identically, 5.5 by 8, and it's also, the grids are almost identical. But what's amazing about Cobb is that he takes a load bearing, so he's taking from history the idea of proportion and scale, but he takes from the contemporary movement the idea of RCC. that the building is no longer a load-bearing building, and so in section, that building is magic compared to Palladio. It changes everything about the way that you experience space within, though it's organized almost identically. So that's resonance, right? That's the creative pursuit. That you're looking at history, but you're understanding that I'm not making the load-bearing building again. That I have now, access to something else. So we did this project for a competition which we lost with Kiran Kumar, who's a faculty at USD. Kiran worked with us on Nalanda as well. He was in our office at that point. And so we had these 6 ideas for Pahal. That's the campus plan. And so we were talking about Nalanda. We said it is also in Bihar. And so what are the things that are really important to us? And so we said that there are these big boxes in this competition. There are these large halls that where people are going to play and practice and all of that. What if I took this program which had all of these large halls, and then I found all of the smaller things, the saunas, the restrooms, the coaches' offices, the small meeting halls, the classrooms where they get instruction, and that becomes the secondary wrap which is in red in this plan, and that gives a different scale to this very large, these large behemoths in that landscape. And so this notion that there would be this kind of earth, almost like as if I took the ruins of Nalanda and I put the big block of indoor stadium inside that this wrap was made out of the old Nalanda brick, that it was this ancient ruin, and then I scooped out that ruin and I created this space for games. And that when you went through this campus as a pedestrian, that really the scale of that campus was not the scale of the big halls, but it was the scale of this really articulated enclosure behind which these halls sat. Abhin won this competition. We got a special mention. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride. So that's the kind of wrap that then has all of the smaller programs feeding into that. And then you get this kind of really articulated, facade, which then could have been quite beautiful, and lovely to design, but also from inside the hall you get this. I mean, imagine this, if you lit it up, that you get this incredible magic, that it's the really industrial, but then you get this really handmade stuff that's up against it. And then there was the idea of the heart of campus. What's that heart of campus like? So it's got all of these wraps, but it's got these mounds and turrets and things like that it really created a sense of that space within. So that, what is that space like? What does it feel like to be there? And what fronts onto it? So anyway. So just the idea of nodes and markers within a very flat landscape. That you have, you can see, I'm close to, the dining hall, or I'm close to the housing. That in that landscape, you get a trace of how you make your passage through that landscape and into other parts of the campus. This was the housing, and in the housing we put all of the toilets, the storerooms, all of that is this stuff, and all of the rooms are in corridors and things outside of this. So there were these blobs that then had all of the services. And the last project, this is Sabha. Very long. So this is Sabha. You can see from this plan, that there is the native town, the servicing of all of the armed cantonment. So we have this wonderful, I don't know if you know Aliye Rizvi. She's a writer, and she said, Sabha is at the threshold between the barracks and the bazaar. That's the threshold. The site sits at that point where it's between that, it straddles that. What's amazing about Sabha is that it is one of thousands of other great buildings which have great potential, and so it could become a precedent if someone has the appetite for it. That RBNMS itself owns a lot of land around here, which if someone was to adopt, like Cinnamon and Sabha, that they can become quite potent public institutions for the city. Cinnamon is in public, but yeah. So there's the Sabha building, and in that kind of really dense context, surprising sort of courtyards and backyards, etc., which you encounter. That's RBNMS, that's Rai Bahadur Arpan Swami Deliyar. He's a trader who made a lot of money, but was also a philanthropist, a very early philanthropist in the city. But of course, he was making things for his community, for the Tamil expatriates who would come from Tamil Nadu to service the cantonment. And so he set up, the school for girls in this environment. He set up, colleges. So ours used to be a Tamil school, and we found all of these things when we were clearing up the debris. There were class group photos and things. Some of them had traces of the old building behind it, certificates, things like that. All of this sports day special. Yeah. So it was an amazing treasure trove. So these are all. So we did a catalog. In fact, Tarini was here. Did a study with other people. I don't know, Tarini, who else was there? Pranin, did you go? Yeah, Pranin and Tarini went. And so these are the buildings that are over 100 years old. So there's Sava and there's Cinnamon. So there's a lot more, We're just at the tip now, and hopefully some of them are temples as well. That's all RBNM's land. Sunitha has done a beautiful school in that site there. He's now, I think, working on the renovation of the big auditorium, and the classroom's already done. But there's other buildings here as well, apart from RBN. And then, of course, this has become a big sports facility in the city. But like Harkot Narayan Swami Mudliar, there's also Ravichandran and his wife Hema, who put all of the money to make this Sabha. And Ravichandran was on the building committee at the BIC. So that's how we got the project. But it's close to 12,000 bucks a square foot, to renovate a building like that. And so, it's a lot of money. Ravi doesn't miss every meeting. He has to make that point. Like, you made me spend 12,000 bucks. This is most expensive project. So there's the existing building. We made lots of models. We have a wonderful team on this. Sanjana, Amrita, Ganga, and Leah. So they were the architects. Sanjana really drove, up until halfway, really cataloging everything, getting the interns to document. We have a wonderful YouTube channel where we've got short videos of all of the different, which I'll send to you, which has all of the different techniques that the wonderful contractor used to renovate. Lime plaster, woodworking, all of that. These are all the different damaged portions of the roof in the Madras Terrace building, where plastering has come off, or there's water damage, or the bricks are exposed. Even the facades were completely documented for what they were from photographs from you can see immediately where the pipes are, where the water and the stains of those water channels. The rear of the building looking onto the inner courtyard had very strange smaller windows. The arch was completely closed up, and they didn't have windows anymore like the front. The front, all of the windows had been completely, they were all decrepit and falling apart. Documented all, and that's just falling apart. So first is the restoration of that Madras Terrace roof by removing a lot of that existing waterproofing that was above the. So we kept everything till the brick, so that you can see the brick diagonally placed. All of the surki and everything we removed above that, and then we replaced it with new waterproofing, again all with traditional lime mortar and brick bat. We changed the main beams that you see running in this direction. They were all new. We slipped out the old beams and put in new beams without disturbing the roof. The contractor did all that. So this is them moving these beams out, propping the roof up with all of these stays and keeping them, and then bringing them out. But you can see slipping in new beams. We have a video that shows. But also, once you propped it up, you could cut off the base of the column, redo the base of the column, and then set it. It's like magical photography. Yeah. And you can see the new beam there with the old beam. So we're just in the process of replacing. And then the other roof was also completely redone. A lot of new members there with a new calcium silicate, some waterproofing membrane, and then timber purlins and Madras, mango tiles. So this is the work in progress. And then air conditioning, beautiful brickwork. Of course, we have to stitch all of it up back again with stone stitches to address all. And then now, today, you guys have all seen it. So that's the existing plan. There were some additions, so we removed all those additions, all in red, other things that we got rid of, and then we added stuff at the back, And so that's the cafe, utilities, storeroom, electrical room, toilets, disabled accessible toilet, etc., etc. And then some sections. That's all new. So the cafe has a roof that is a double split, and then the street facade itself, and then the backyard with the courtyard. And this Pranil made this beautiful drawing. He's here today, but just telling you all of the things that were salvaged from the old building and used in the new. So all of the timber members that we removed, we refashioned for window frames, for the cafe roof, for the veranda roof, etc. All of the mango tiles we salvaged and reused for the verandas and for the connectors. A lot of the stone that we removed from the flooring is now either thresholds or sill pieces or flooring. In a lot of the building is all recycled kadapa and granite. And so that's the building now. I'll just move quickly with this. This is 7 in the morning, nice, lovely eastern light. Sujata Keshavan did the logo. She's a very well-known, the first Indian woman to do a graphic design course at Yale. Sujata, yeah. She's senior now. I don't think she runs a company anymore. She does other things now. She's Ram Goa's wife. Yeah. So there's. Okay, I think I'm done. You guys are fed up now. I just want to quickly just show you the. One second. Yeah, the roof. This roof is kind of a response to the roof across the way. Because there's Anavasanti library which is on the other side, which is also like that. And so you get this kind of conversation across the street. Yeah, this is the rear where you come in from the back. Yeah. These are Tarini's photographs, which is important. I'm going to skip this. These are videos that show you the world. Yeah, so this is the team. So that's Sanjana, Amrita, Riya and Ganga. Ganga really finished it, in a way, completed the whole project. That's Raghu who was with it, and Prajakta who was the site engineer. So it was actually all women. Like it's a whole women, all the important people were all the women on the project. Prajakta was incredible. That's Nilesh who was the main contractor. That's the carpentry team who redid the roofs, Shaju in the yellow shirt. And that's Vasauda, Professor Vasauda from Ahmedabad, who came right at the beginning because we had no clue what we were getting into. And he spent 4 days with us. What you need to think about when you're going with this thing, And he's very precise. So, yeah, amazing guy. So this notion of absorbing into your bloodstream is what all of us do. You draw, you travel, you try to get into your bloodstream the notion of what makes these buildings through plan sections, details. But you also look at other architects. I've had the great chance to spend time with people like Zumthor. But in the prep for that, you get then into your bloodstream all of Zumthor, or you try to. You start drawing. You start absorbing. The interview is available on that. And then we took Zumthor to IIM. He looked at the two plans and he's like, oh God, my buildings are so small. And then I also had the chance to meet Aravena in Wayanad. Again, the same exercise of trying to figure out what maybe drives this guy. And then my teachers, of course. And then there's Peter Smithson, Herman Hertzberger, there's Khan, the Trenton Bathhouse. There's Korea who talks about the deep structure. That you come to these places and it feels that it resonates. And all of us feel it. What is it about these buildings? And then Utsan, a beautiful idea. That's the sketch for the Opera House. And then Munio, who's a great hero of ours, public building in Lucia. And my teachers, Mr. Tupe, Korea, Fred Cotter, Collage City, Julian Bynard, who taught Kevin Lynch's class at MIT, Graham Morrison, and the Trumpet Boys. And there's my brother and Doshi. We made these 2 films. This is just the last film where Doshi summoned the rains. He was talking about it minutes ago, bright sunny day, and he said, I came here once and suddenly the clouds parted and it came down. And then we turned the corner and come here and boom! Like magic, And then he himself is like, Arey! But also to be with my brother and to have this thing between us, that we had this chance to make these films together. And to have and for Suni to have, I'm gone like for like, a month, I'm like Lapata ladies. And to have this chance. So we made 2 films, there's Doshi and us in 2008, young boys, and then Ravaged. Doshi is still the same. Thank you. Yeah.
I think incredible. It's almost like how I was talking to you about this tiny desk concert, right? I think it felt like a concert. Everyone focused.
Very long. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm also happy that we could, actually have all of us together.
Yeah.
Lots of us in this.
Yeah, it feels
small
great
room.
here. It feels great.
Yeah, and it was something that we always wanted to do.
Right.
Because we miss this understanding of life, and it is so fast paced,
Yes.
and it's almost like listening to an LP, the way you were putting it. It's like 2 hours, 1.5 hours, I think,
Right.
listening to an LP without changing the track. Right? So
Well, you
I think,
you didn't have much of a choice.
and the start with all the observations that you spoke about, and there were moments where, honestly, for me it was incredible to see those transitioning into your work. I mean, collectively, of course.
Right.
I think it is incredible, and I'm so happy that we got you to speak to all of us on such a personal level that I'm not even thinking what I'm saying, but it's just sort of trying to, you could see a lot of manifestations of life from the point of teachers, masters, your observations, travel, being together,
Right.
you remembering everybody's names,
Right.
and it almost looks like life slows down for you when you're working on projects, right? Because with all the work that you showed, it's difficult to assess how much time has actually gone into it, because I'm sure there's someone constantly pushing for that presentation to happen, and in that you found moments where it's almost like there's a repository of many things in your life, and you're able to pick that right context that sort of adapts itself through you, and it manifests itself into something extraordinary. So it's so difficult for someone like us to assess how much time actually goes into the
Right.
work, because although you spoke about process, it's beautiful that it's impossible to sort of box it into like, oh, we know where you started and where you ended.
Right.
It's like seeing the transition of your lives is what we see in each one of the works that you do. So it's not about just picking something,
Right.
even if it is core memory.
Right.
It's also about it being a part of you like forever. And then it's like each project is actually an extension of your life from the time you were born.
From that pool.
From that, I think it's incredible to see that, because I think that's how I could stitch all the projects. It goes back to that first
Right.
sort of image.
Right.
So it's not about just contextually or culturally looking at what works here. Of course it's not. But it sort of takes you back each time to that memory. It's almost like a cinema. Like, I'm sure somebody should document the way you all think. maybe it could be us. So it'll be beautiful to assess that because I think extraordinary. Thank you.
Yeah, but presentations force us to, in a way, rationalize. I mean, while you're in the thick of it, I mean, those who are here from the office, while you're in the thick of it, sometimes it doesn't make sense. Like, what are we doing? Where are we going? What's the point of this? How are we going to make any sense of this? It feels, and I don't know if it's probably true for you guys as well, that sometimes you're actually hedging. You're waiting because it's not there yet. You don't know yet, and so you're keeping at bay. Sometimes I'm delaying at the office because I don't know the answer yet, or I'm delaying the client and I'm like, yeah, tomorrow I'll give you, and that you're trying to figure out a way to. I mean, there are projects that don't work. I mean, for whatever reason, and sometimes it's because the angels didn't come, the genie didn't show up, and that I couldn't get, or we couldn't figure out what to do. And those projects, it may be good to put a presentation of things that didn't work, like how did this thing not happen? So, doing a presentation actually for all of us, whoever, even those interns who are leaving to go back, it's good to put a presentation in a way to rationalize, to figure out a way to articulate what exactly was it that this was about. And so that's why the propositions are useful, because for me, and that they are sorting out a way to think of the work. That maybe there are these things that are preoccupations for us. Maybe next one will be about all of the field ones. The photos we don't show anymore.
But when you think through, of course, there's so much today, and I think it is too quick to even just react or respond. And I think, maybe over time it's just going to trickle. But I think maybe I'm not, I don't know if I'm right, but through all your projects, all of that all of you do together, there is a constant continuation from one to the other. Whether it is about your, the circulation that we really talk about, that's where the life really happens of every built space. So, is that true?
Yeah.
That there is even if it's Sabha, because all the others, maybe sometimes you have a palette saying, I'm using brick, kota, cement, some metal probably, and then creating a poetry out of it and saying it differently each time.
Right.
But Sabha is like, okay, I'm not giving you any of that, and then how are you going to do it?
Right.
With that space which already has such a strong story, but there is still that search of, your creating of those in-between spaces. How can it start telling its own story?
Right.
So, are you, as a studio, constantly in the search of looking at how that can be played with better, or is that really happening?
I think subconsciously all the time, I'm thinking more in terms of, obviously for architecture, that I think is always research. But even when we are doing interiors, we're always thinking about how this space is kind of always possible to use in many different ways, and to kind of give it more than one use at a time. So good. I think for me, at least personally, it's like that plan has to be perfect, in the way it works and in the way people occupy it. I can't express it very theoretically, like I'm not at all a presentation person, but just that the plan works so perfectly that every time an occupier is actually using it, there are many ways to enjoy that space. So I think that's very important as a fundamental principle of any space. So I think it's subconsciously always there. I don't think it's like, we should do it like this, but it's always there. And I think it stems out of everything we've seen and experienced, and that's why the travel is so important. That's why seeing other projects is so important. It kind of then gets expressed in our own way, in everything that we do. So,
Yeah, I think that thing about use and space, that link that unfortunately limits so much of the work that we initially get asked to do. That I want these things. That with the BIC and also a lot of the houses that that we've done, we're trying to not label them in that way. That this is going to be only this kind of thing. That they are flex and that they accommodate different ways in which to occupy them. And that then is the richness, and that then forces the person also over time to define that in different ways, to use it in different ways. And you can also do this, like this room, right?
Yeah.
That it's got all of these different ways in which you manage it so that it can accommodate other ways in which you use it. And that, I think, a lot of the great buildings do that. They give you this kind of flexibility and this ability to imagine. Which is why that 4920, whatever that circulation, that stuff that's in between things is so critical. And if you were to manage that cleverly, then for the life of the building, people will invent ways to use it and imagine it and to appropriate it. The rooms are limited in that sense.
For all the things that you have worked across or even tried to dissect, there seems to be a very strong philosophical connect or a spiritual connect that you make or try to find out about the person or the place that it is resonating. Are there some of these philosophies or sort of learnings of philosophy that you recommend for us to get started understanding where people started thinking, or there's some documentaries or books or something that you would recommend? Because architecture as a philosophy, we understand that it starts somewhere very far from where it looks like it starts. Like the Buddha, the caves that you show. Like it does not start at all where you think it does. It is just somewhere very far that it comes from, and then you reach there. So are there something interesting things that we could see or read?
I would say the greatest thing you can do, or at least the thing that's helped me a lot, is to hang out with people who are much brighter than you. And so seek out, the reason that I made the Doshi film is only for that I will get more time with him, and so whatever the way he's expressing his ideas, the way he thinks, I'm not in any sense like that, but you imbibe from them the way they are as people in the world.
Right.
When you figure that out, all of the rest kind of falls into place. You can be whatever you want if you've got this kind of more evolved understanding of who you are. Wittgenstein said that, that the work of an architect is the work on oneself, on discovering who you are. And that comes through this and evolved people, like Richard, for instance, The masterclass, the 6,000 square foot building is not the point of the masterclass.
Yeah.
It's that you're having studio a certain way, or in the review he's seen something that none of us saw. And how is he thinking? How is he coming to it? And just in the way of his being, that something then rubs off of you. Reading does go a long way, but I think this idea that you would seek out those people who seem to have reached some level of realization. That's why you go to the Buddha, or you go to, and that you've spent some time, that in that you then get some sense of it. The base, that's the importance of the base group, and we always try and find a way to either hang out with Noe or go to Edgar, or just to be, we're not talking about our work, I'm not showing him, look at my new project. We're just shooting the breeze, having some time together, and then...
I think I also think we've been incredibly fortunate or blessed with our overall interaction with all these domains. So somehow or the other, over time, obviously the Bangalore gang and we were studying and working. And there were 6-8 practices, and we had access to all of them at that point. But even so, when we were at MIT, to actually meet so many stalwarts, and to be able to hear them, interact with them, and then through my work
Right.
and like having design crits with Philip Johnson. Like you don't get those opportunities, and having lunch with Zaha and all. It's just something that you will only imagine, and like how much you learn from them being so humble in what they do and how important everything that they do is, and all that is so imbibed because you've experienced all of that, and then to come to have this incredible time and connection with Doshi and Korea. It's been like so life changing in so many ways, not just with architecture, just with life. I think as like being the kind of people you have to be or you ought to be is so important. So everything kind of affects you.
Books, I don't know. I mean, there are thousands of books.
I mean,
Akshay knows more than me.
that, in a way, but yeah, I think that answers the question really well. To just be starstruck.
No, I think
Not to engage, actually.
Yeah, that's
it won't come to you all the time. But I think you have to make those happy chances happen.
There is one kind of obscure book that I would recommend, which is not an architecture book, but it's, I don't know if you know Dag Hammarskjöld. Dag Hammarskjöld was the first UN Secretary General,
Right.
and he died in a plane crash, soon after. I think he had been finished his term also. But before he died, he had kept a manuscript in his drawer, and he told this poet whose name is now escaping me, but they were very good friends, and he said, if whatever happens to me, there's this manuscript, take a look at it, and if you think it's worthwhile, then publish it, when I die. And so that book is called Marking, and it's like a diary that Dag Hammarskjöld kept for himself. And he was a very, very successful public servant, did a lot of great things, was a very widely respected person. But the diary, this book is all his personal insecurities, manifest writ large, his search for spirituality, his unsure, his uncertainty about what, and not a mention of the UN or any of this. It's like these really personal essays about all of the things that, as creatives, it looks like it's like a cakewalk, right? But every day you wonder whether you're any good, that someday someone's going to figure it out that I'm completely faking it, like I don't know anything and that it's all going to come out, and we all have that insecurity in us. And so reading this book is like a look into the things that you don't want to confront yourself. And as a creative person, actually, I don't know if you guys feel it, but that pressure is immense, that you have to constantly be, like someone's come to you with a thing and now I got to do this again, like I thought I cracked it, I figured it out and I don't have to again perform or do, and this constant need to try to do something worthwhile is an incredible pressure, an incredible, it feels like at some point the whole thing will come crashing down and then they'll say, yeah. No, it's absolutely, it's something that a lot of people feel that way. There's that, you guys know this, that Elizabeth Gilbert's, that speech she gave after the TED talk she gave after she won, she was on New York bestsellers list when she was 40 years old. And so people would come up to her and they would commiserate. They said, oh my God, your career is over. You're never going to top this. You're not going to have another. It's so rare that people get to be on the top of the New York bestsellers list. And so she said, one way to react to that, if you've done something really great and now you're under pressure to perform again, is that you either start drinking, right? You're an artist, and so here's, I have no other recourse. And then the other way to think about it is that the magic or the great value doesn't come from you. That the great secret or the great incantation actually comes from the genie. Your job is to show up. Like you got to come to the office, you got to be ready because the genie is going to show up and you won't be here in the office, you'll be sleeping at home or something. So you got to show up. Like you got to do the riyaz, and then someday the conduit will open, and hope you have that pen in your hand and hope you will draw it because it's not going to be, it's fleeting, like the poet, And so she says that then removes completely the pressure on me. Like if I didn't write the great book, It's not on me. It's on the genie. Like I was there. Right? Where were you? Like why didn't you show up? And so you distance yourself from the pressure of actually having to come up with the big thing. Which means, like in Doshi's film, Doshi says that the clues are all around us. That everywhere, any conversation you have on site with your client, with someone at the office, in passing by the model in the corridor, that Zuntor suddenly sees something at that instant, which he would have missed if he wasn't alert to it. And then he gets that idea to do something. Zuntor came here for his talk, right? Did I tell you this? So he came, and the second day, the day of the lecture, I think, he was in West End. We had put him up in West End in one of those beautiful rooms with a garden outside. So in the morning, we had lined up all these things for him to do. To go to the city market, to have a walk around, Tipu's fort, Tipu's palace, all that. Nice, and forget the names now, but there was like really good guides as well, people who are going to take him around. Suddenly in the morning, at 8 or something, he calls, the Swiss thing, the girl from there, and says, cancel all my appointments, I will see you at lunch. So then we cancelled everything. So I'm calling, making all these tough calls like, we cancelled. It's like I've cancelled my program, what about my thing? And so I said, well, I'll line up something. And so we cancelled everything. So lunch he shows up. He's ebullient. He's like jumping, like fully, like joy. So I said, what happened? Peter, you cancelled everything in the morning. He said, I was sitting in that veranda outside and I've been working on this house. And it just came. And I said, can you show me? He said, no. I'm not showing anything. And so even he has to wait, it's not coming. But he was there. He had a paper, he had a pen, and it came.
Even when we went to IIM, he has a little clip,
pads, paper,
and sheets of paper. So we went to the whole of IIM, we went to the hostel block, and he only is hospital. And he sat and he was like, I just don't want to walk. He sat and did some sketches. And they were like, what are you doing? He said, no, I'm not telling you. Like, I'm copying something.
I'm going to pick up the card and
So it never stops, this kind of.
When you guys start on a project, is there a sort of formula that you start with and then allow the genie to sort of disrupt it, or do you wait for that kind of like big idea or the genie to kind of strike? Yeah.
Site is important. I think we visit the site if we can. And sometimes the project changes because of that. We're just completing a house in Nandi where we had a plan, or we had some idea of a plan before we had gone to the site. And then we visited the site and then the whole thing changed. That the contours were a certain way and the views were a certain way. And so site, these are very basic, I think. Second year they tell you, that you need to go to site, figure out, but you don't listen. So the site was, and the program is important for us. In spite of whatever I've said, it's nice to lay it all out. In fact, there's a wonderful book on that mother house that Michael Merrill wrote. You guys have it. But when you flip through the book, at the beginning of this set of sketches that is from the archive, his 62-year-old Khan is sitting and he's making program drawing. Like how many cells are in the sister's house? What's the size of the church? How big? He's got a sheet which looks like my sheet. Like I can do that, But he lands somewhere else at the end. But program and site, I would say, you just lay everything out and then you keep working, trying to organize it.
But I think a lot of great changes happen over the course of discussing with the client. To have good critique always leads to better projects. So there are projects where clients have no opinion. Then it's okay, but it's greater when you actually have good opinion.
Do you guys have a process? I mean, is there a way you do?
Yeah, so maybe we'll present.
Yes. Yeah,
It's
we
actually very
should
different from how we all think. So it's
Yeah.
really, really interesting. So.
Right. Yeah, we should get you guys. I should have said that.
Yeah, but listening to the entire presentation was like listening to a poetry. And it was like a caffeine to brain, like, you know, you just woken up with everything that you said. The way you articulate things, we connected on a lot of points. Like, we also strongly believe that, you know, architecture is our life and life is architecture. There's no line in between them. But it was really great to listen to you. It was more personal than we have heard you otherwise.
Right. That's a setting. We have work to do in the office.
We generally hear you pick others' brains. This is the first time that I'm hearing you.
So I think we'll
Yeah.
hopefully do this again sometime. Maybe
Yeah.
more like a workshop. I don't know. There's so much that we can do, and I'm happy we were able to put this together.
Thank you. Thank you.